Hello and welcome back to Joey Sewy. This is my channel where I talk about sewing, creativity, knitting and life, and today we are continuing our series all about creating a bespoke prom dress. In this video we're going to go all the way from the cutting out of the final fabric, pattern placement, all the way through creating the underlining, creating the bodice pieces, and right almost to the end of the process. Everything except the final fitting and the images of the final dress. So we've got a lot to get through. Let's get straight into it. Here we are deciding the pattern placement for the skirt. I've put the picture of the original skirt up there in the corner of the screen because I wanted to show you what Chloe was inspired by. Now the print that she had must have been made specifically for the dress, because the only way you get a border print like that on a circle skirt is if the print itself is actually curved, because you can see from that pattern piece there that the bottom edge of the skirt is a curved line. So we had lengthy discussions about exactly how we were going to place the pattern onto the fabric to get the best result possible with the fabric that we had, and this is the placement that we decided to go for. So what I'm doing, because I was terrified about cutting the fabric out, is I am using a chalk roller type of marking tool. I can put a link down below to it, to mark out the pattern piece, and then I took the pattern piece off and then I just had a look at exactly how the cut lines were going to go when I cut it out, and then because I was content with that, I went ahead and I did the scary thing of using my scissors and cutting it out. There was no going back at that point. The expensive fabric that there was no time or money to reorder was cut. After the skirt, I moved on to cutting out the bodice pieces. So these were my pattern pieces after I'd adapted them from the first fitting, and these were the pieces that I cut out. So again, I had pattern placement choices to make, which I'd discussed with Chloe, and then finally I sewed it all together without any closures. And here is Chloe looking rather marvellous and very pleased with herself trying on the dress. So essentially that was the second fitting, and I wanted her to try it on at that stage so that we could make absolutely sure that it all worked out. You've just seen the first final version of the dress, so you've just seen Chloe in the first time that she wore the actual fabric that the dress was made out of. But that dress had none of the structure in it, so it was literally one layer of cotton that was largely basted together, and it was there to make absolutely sure that the changes that I made at the fitting before that with the toile and the cutting out that I did had all gone fine, and that I could go ahead knowing that the pattern that I now had and the measurements and the shapes and everything that I now had all worked, and they did, thank goodness. So the next stage is really all the detail, and that means essentially remaking the dress another 2 times, because I'm going to make an underlining and I'm going to make a lining, and I'm going to do all the finishing that you don't do in toiles. So that's zips and hems and neck bands and hooks and eyes and all of that kind of stuff that you just don't do in toiles. You pin them together. So quite time consuming, but definitely the final leg of getting to the end of making the dress. I thought I'd just first say what an underlining is. So when you make, put my notes down, when you make a structured dress or a special occasion dress, quite often you will have an underlining, and essentially it's the middle of a sandwich. So the outside is your dress, it's the fabric that you see, it's essentially what Chloe's already worn and what you've just seen her wear. The inside is the lining, which is another dress inside the dress that makes the inside look nice. It makes it wear better, and it means that finishing the edges is easier. Those are certainly in the dress that I'm talking about, those are the reasons why it has a lining. And then there is the underlining, and the underlining is what carries the scaffolding for the dress. It's what carries the structure. So if there was any corset boning in your dress, it would be in the underlining. So you have the 2 bits of bread, and then the underlining is the filling for your sandwich. So you never ever see the underlining in a finished dress, neither from the inside nor from the outside, but you do see the results of having it there. So it's all about the structure and the fit. And actually, even in some dresses that are really floaty, you will have an underlining there to hold the bride in. So maybe you want some body shaping in there, even though you want quite a floaty dress. It's not the case with this dress, but quite often you will have actual structure in there with an underlining, and then an apparently effortless dress on top, which actually isn't effortless. It's like a swan paddling away under the water with that underlining. So that is what I am now going to go on and show you how I made it and what techniques I used and made up for Chloe's dress. Now I'm showing you the beginnings of the underlining. So I took the silk and I applied some iron-on woven interfacing, and I put all the markings for the darts on there, and then I sewed in the darts to the underlining and to an identical lining piece that didn't have the interfacing on it. Now what I'm going to show you is what we decided to do for structure in the dress. We decided not to do corset boning, but Chloe wasn't going to wear a bra with the dress, so we decided to put a bra inside, which involved me pinning a bra in as shown and then sewing a bra. Obviously initially I pinned this with Chloe inside the dress to make absolutely sure that we have the cup placement right. Sewing through it, this is speeded up, sewing through it was tricky, slow, and it worked in the end, but it didn't feel like it was working at the time. If you're going to use this method, it works. It's just hard getting the bra underneath the machine and stretching out that elastic so that when it's on the body it still has some grip. Things to note is that you don't want to sew right to the center of the cleavage because you'll make the lining do a funny shape. So it's a very small bust bra, so I kept about 1.5 inches on either side away from the cleavage point. There's the lining, and now I'm starting to construct my sandwich. So I'm going to put the bra inside the lining. So this is the point after which you will never see the bra part of the dress again. So now you're looking at how the inside of the bodice will look when you look inside the dress, and I am pinning those two pieces of fabric together, which are exactly the same because they were cut out at the same time. So I'm matching the side seams, I'm matching the dart lines, I'm using every point that there is to match, and then I'm just going to basically take them and sew them together and treat them as one piece from this point onwards in the process. Again, it was pretty laborious. So the next stage was the zipper insertion, and I want to refer you to a video that there will be a link down below. It's from the Threads team, which is an American sewing magazine, and it's presented by Kenneth D. King, and it is a very clearer than I'm going to be able to show you, illustration of the technique I used to insert an invisible zip. And there are a few nuanced ways that you can insert a zip, and this is the best one that I've found. So I wanted to refer you to that before I got on and showed you my I'm doing the technique shown in that video, but I just haven't got the ability to film it as well as they did. In this method of sewing an invisible zip, the first thing you do is sew the seam shut, and then you pin the teeth of the zip very much centered along the seam line. So that's what I'm doing now after you've pressed the seam open. So I keep checking underneath to make sure the teeth of the zip are exactly on the seam line. Then you hand sew that in place in order to be able to remove the pins. I made a not deliberate mistake there, in which you're supposed to only hand sew to the seam allowance, so you shouldn't actually be able to see my hand stitching at this point, because I sewed it through the dress as well as the seam allowance. but that's shown in the instructional video I directed you to. Next, you unpick the seam with a seam ripper, and be very careful because it will upset you a lot if you start ripping holes in your dress at this point. Then when you've unpicked all the way down to the bottom of the seam line, you then open the zip in order to separate the sides. Now this method relies on you using an overlong zip, so the zip's at least 4 inches or so longer than it strictly needs to be, and I'm using forceps so that I can just poke them through like that, get hold of the zipper tab and then pull the zipper open past the line where I have unpicked, and then the zip is open. And what this means is that you can treat the two sides of the invisible zip very separately. Right, final leg, and it's full of hand sewing. So what makes a bespoke dress really special, I think, are 2 things. Number 1 is that it will fit your body because it will be made to your body. I suppose number 1A is that it's exactly the dress you want. You know, you can say I want it longer, shorter, sleeves, no sleeves, all of that. So you get all those choices. And then the second thing is the finishing that you will get on a bespoke dress, or you should get on a bespoke dress or on a couture dress. And a lot of that involves hand sewing, and that was certainly the case with this dress. There was an awful lot of hand sewing. So the machine sewing, you know, you can zoom along and that didn't take all that long. The hand sewing took hours. So I'm going to show you through some of the hand sewing, really just the hem I have video of, but I wanted to let you know all the different parts of the dress that I did hand sew. So I hand sewed the hem, which was 5 meters, so it took a few hours. I hand sewed the bottom of the bodice, so down here to the waistband. So that was, you could have stitched in the ditch, if you know what that is, on a machine, but I wasn't content that was going to be quite invisible enough, so I hand sewed inside. I hand sewed some of the neckband closed here, and I hand sewed hooks and eyes at the back of the neckband. I also hand sewed hooks and eyes at the centre back closure at the top of the zip, so that the top of that zip doesn't take all the pressure of the body. And finally I hand sewed the lining to the inside of where the zip was, so I slip stitched that lining in place against the zip. So hours and hours and hours of hand sewing, but it means that you get a really flawless invisible finish from the outside, which is what you want. And some of it you wouldn't necessarily notice to the untrained eye. Some of it you definitely would, because the machine versions are really clumsy, and or you can't even achieve some of these techniques without hand sewing. I'm a big fan of hand sewing, so let me quickly show you the film I do have of me hand sewing the horsehair braid hem. What you can see here is the horsehair braid, which is actually not horsehair at all in modern sewing, it's made of plastic. And I have machine sewn that to the hem, and then I've folded that under, and I didn't press it because I wanted more of a couture finish where this hem is not flat as a pancake when it's been pressed by an iron, but it's actually got some bounce and body to it as it curves under. And then I'm doing catch stitching all the way along. So you pick up a thread or two of the fabric on the wrong side, which is then invisible on the right side. So you need to check, if you're not used to doing this, check with each stitch until you're sure that your technique is not picking up anything that shows on the right side of the fabric. This is speeded up to at least double speed. And that's it, folks, we're done for this video. I hope you don't feel cheated that I'm not showing you the final dress, but I am going to show you the final dress really soon. I absolutely promise. There isn't going to be a big delay like there has been between these two videos, but this video is quite long. This is all about the construction, and then we'll have a beautiful big reveal in a couple of days' time. I absolutely promise. So I'll see you again really soon. Thanks for watching. Bye. Here are links to other videos on my channel, including at the top the playlist for other videos in this series about making a prom dress.